Hi everyone, I'm Mindy Egan and welcome to the October 2025 release video for Concord and Ninth. Welcome to the introduction to the Citrus and Spice Stamp, Die, and Stencil Pack. What this product bundle allows you to create is banners across your card front. So there is the stencil to color them in. The stamp set adds the banner or the string that attaches your banner on your card front, plus maybe some added details. And then you have some dies to coordinate with the sentiments and some of the individual images. Now you can see on the back of the packaging, it creates a banner that can be poinsettias or even snowflakes. We have a banner for orange and apple slices. There's a banner for holly and berries. And then there's one with just berries. And then there's stencils to have individual items of those as well that you can cut out with the coordinating die, along with some dies for the sentiments. I'm also going to demonstrate how to stencil and stamp those banners, but first let's take a closer look at the products. Here's a look at everything stamped and stenciled out. The stencil is a 3-piece pack, and there are etched numbers on there for 1, 2, and 3. Now, also on your stencil are some etched brackets that I'll show you in a little bit more detail later on, and that helps group your items together. So first, let's start with this banner at the top with the leaves and the berries. So here you can kind of see those brackets on screen. You can definitely see them better in person. Now I'm looking at the bracket that does the leaves and the berries. So we have one layer for leaves, another layer that you can do in a different color. We have one layer for the berry, and then the second layer of the berries adds a shadow effect. Then on the coordinating image on the stamp set, it's going to add some additional detail to your leaves, so you could do it with or without. The next image I have stenciled out is that star design. So that can be a poinsettia flower, or it can turn into snowflakes, however, or whatever color you decide to use for it. Then below that is the berries. So the berries are bracketed off. There's 2 designs for the berries. You have your first layer, which is just the circle, and then the second layer, which is going to add that shadow to give it a little bit of dimension. Looking at the stamp set, your first string at the top there, it does have spaces, so it's going to be kind of in between your designs. You have one for that poinsettia look. There's also a second design to that, so there's more detail you can add to it. You have your cranberry string. You have your additional stamp layer for the leaves. You have your string for the orange and apple string. And then there's the sentiments that help kind of curve around those banners as well. The second stencil is going to create that orange and apple string. And this one, all you need to do is shift it up a little bit here and there to fill in the design. So the first layer creates kind of the main base color for each of those. And then as you move your stencil around, you can see how they perfectly line up to create more details for the orange slices or for the apple slice as well. And the last layer is going to give you even more detail on the oranges, and then it also provides the seeds and the stem for the apples. And as I showed earlier, there is a string to stamp so that can attach your apple and orange slices. Now we do have individual ones as well. So there is an individual stencil image you can create for the apple slice and also the orange that you can stencil down and then die cut out with the coordinating dies so you can pop those up for dimension. You have cinnamon sticks, you have another orange slice, you have berries and also those stars. And then again, the orange does have some detail on the stamp set. We have a shadow that you can stamp for the berries, additional details on the cinnamon sticks, and then as mentioned, the coordinating die. The sentiments included is "'Tis the season to keep cozy, so grateful for you, wishing you love and warmth, stay cozy." Those are the stamped ones. And then you have "So very thankful" as a standalone die. Now I'm going to demonstrate how these stencils work along with adding the detail from the stamp set. So I'm starting just at the top of the stencil to add I'm turning it into a poinsettia flower. I am starting off with pimento ink, and it really does help to use a smaller blending brush. That way you don't have to do any masking off. Now, if you wanted to create a full panel with each of these, I would recommend cleaning your stencil off in between each one so you don't transfer any of this ink onto your paper. I started with the next set, which is going to be the berries. And the first layer of the berries I did with pimento ink once again, and then coming in with a smaller detail brush to add cranberry ink into that little like crescent moon shape. That's going to add your shadow and kind of give the cranberries some dimension. Next, I'm moving on to the leaves and the berries. So for this one, I started out with that first strand of the leaves, and this one I did with pistachio ink. Now, in my preference, what I did after I cleaned off my stencil was I shifted my stencil up to do the first layer of the berries. I personally found that easiest to fill in the leaves, but you do what you are comfortable with when it comes to stenciling them in. So for the berries, they fit really perfect in that first layer of leaves that I stenciled out. And I'm coming in with pimento ink once again to do those berries. And then since I'm down here with the berries, I will just shift that up a little bit to add that little crescent shape, which is going to be that shadow area. This one, I'm going to come in with that cranberry ink once again. Even a really light brown would work to add that shadow area, or a light gray. Then I can move my stencil back up and fill in the rest of the leaves to complete my swag. And that's going to fit in perfectly with what was already stenciled down, because it kind of gives you the curved feature to cover the berries or mask the berries off. So it's really easy to line up. So this color you want to do in maybe just a different color or a different shade than what you previously did. And I'm going to show the stamped features of these a little bit later on. I'm going to continue down by creating my apple slices and orange slices. So that first layer I am doing with nectar ink. That's kind of the base layer for all of my pieces. And then I can move the stencil around to fill in the rest. So shifting it, you can see it's masking off the center of the apple slices. Then I'm just blending in with pimento. It's one of my favorite colors right now. And then I can continue moving this around. So I'm going to do the outer edge using clementine for my orange. There's quite a few detail pieces for the orange slice. And you may notice with the orange slice, I did skip around a little bit on that one too. And that was just because I personally found it easier to do the outside edge first. I could really see that through the stencil, so it allowed me to line up the stencil a little easier. I'm also going to use clementine to add that detail to the center. And then there is one more piece that we add to the center of the orange slice. And that one, I'm going to come in with a spiced cider. So you can have a lot of fun with your color combinations for that orange slice. And for the seeds and the stem of the apples, I'm just going to use nutmeg. I'm going to take this panel and place it in my stamping positioner. So I'm using a MISTI, and I have a sticky mat for the MISTI as well. I found this very helpful, not only in the fact that my strings that's going to attach everything is longer than the card panel, but it's also helping me hold those stamps in place while I line it up, because some of these strings are very delicate. So the sticky mat is also kind of gripping that stamp set for me and holding it in place until I pick it up with the door of the MISTI. And then each of these strings, I will just be stamping them using the nutmeg ink. But of course, you could even heat emboss with it. It would be really pretty to do maybe some gold heat embossing for your strings. Now, a lot of these are just going to be like in between the images to make it look like it's connected. This first one that I had turned into the poinsettia, there is a detail layer to that I am using with cranberry ink. I stamped it, I'd probably say about 3 times to make it really stand out in there. Probably hard to see on camera, but in person, you can really see that detail. I did the string for the cranberries. I did the added detail using rainforest ink for my leaves. And now this one with our apple and oranges, there is going to be a little bit that goes onto the orange and apple slice. So it's not just in between, but also on those as well. Here's my first card project that I created using the stencils to create those banners going all the way across my card front. I stuck with a lot of the colors that I already showed while I demonstrated the banners, and using nutmeg as my string to connect everything, and then just adding a sentiment down there and popping it up with some foam squares. And this is the second card I created using the individual pieces from that set. So I stenciled them and die cut them out with their coordinating die. And then for the background, I have eucalyptus cardstock, and I used a previously released stencil that is the Stay Cozy stencil, and ink blended it with eucalyptus ink. And that is a closer look at the Citrus and Spice Stamp, Die, and Stencil Pack. Welcome to the introduction to Cozy Toes Stamp Set and Dies. This bundle allows you to create different sizes and styles of socks, and really, who knew socks could be so cute? So there is a stamp set that has a few different patterns on it with coordinating sentiments. And then we have the coordinating dies, and you can have small, medium to large socks. We will take a look at each of these here in just a moment. Also, on the die set are just some additional elements that you can use, like hearts. You have your clothesline to hang them from, you have your clothespins. Now, those two patterns at the very top, you would stamp those and then die cut them out with the coordinating die, the longer sock. We have the flower socks, also has centers to it, and then some striped socks. We have ones that create the socks with the teal toe and heel, and then the clothespins and some flowers. So here's a look at some of them that I created. So our first one here is using the heel and the toes. The second set there is the flowers. So you do have your main color that you can stamp, like in pink ink, and then you have the centers for the flowers on your socks. We can do striped socks, we can do polka dot socks, you can add hearts to them, and you have these adorable little baby socks. And then the sentiments included on this set are life socks without you. Congrats on your newest edition. Happy birthday. Miss you. Wanna hang. You knock my socks off. And we make a great pair. The first card I'm sharing with you is just using one single sock because I think we have all run into that in our life where we have one lone sock. And I use the sentiment life socks without you. So it's a very clean and simple card, but I think is super adorable. And for the frame and also the clouds in the background, I use the Plain Amazing set. So I use that shape to go in the center to kind of help frame my design. And then I added in the clouds in the background behind my clothesline. Then on the next card, I actually used the positive or negative piece that I had die cut that out of Harbor cardstock or powder cardstock. And that created a frame in the center for me. Again, I used clouds from the Plain Amazing set as well. And I just could not help with the mist match socks and also keeping some just kind of single on their own. And this one has the sentiment, you knock my socks off. And there are endless designs that you can create with those images and then pairing it with different color combinations for your socks. And don't forget about those cute little socks that you can use to turn into baby cards, welcoming a new baby, or congratulating the family. That is a closer look at the Cozy Toes stamp and die set. Welcome to the introduction to Granny Square Turnabout stamp set and die. The Turnabout this month is a beautiful pattern design that you can create with the Turnabout that can be stamped 1, 2, 3, or 4 times to get that full design. Also included in the set is an individual design. So there's one where you could create just one granny square instead of an entire background. There is a coordinating die for that square as well, and then multiple layers to really build up your color. You have the coordinating die to die cut it out, but there's also a coordinating die if you wanted to die cut out the smaller square from your Turnabout background. There's also a die to die cut out the word thanks in that scripty font and then also a shadow layer to it. And then you have some hooks or the sewing hooks. Now the sentiments that we have are hello, you're all kinds of wonderful, love you so much, happy birthday, happy to know you, and every day is better with you. Now you can do a monochromatic. You could stamp your background maybe just 1 or 2 times, or you can get really colorful like I did here in some of these backgrounds where I was experimenting with colors. Let's go ahead and create a design. So I already have my Turnabout lined up in my Misty stamping tool and I have my Turnabout jig here. This is white cardstock that's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I'm placing that on my Turnabout jig in a landscape orientation. I always have my numbers up in that top right-hand corner. This is number 1, and I'm stamping that first layer in Nectar ink. My poor Nectar ink does need to be refilled, so I did have to stamp it multiple times. Now, the second turn, you want to make sure you turn your Turnabout jig to the number 2 in the top right-hand corner. The second color I stamped is grapefruit. I turned my jig, so the 3 is in the top right position. And then I'm going to stamp this a third time. This color is going to be honeycomb. And then our last turn, turn number 4, is going to have that 4 in the top right corner. That one we are going to be stamping in Peacock ink. And I do thoroughly clean my stamp set in between each of these colors. I like to use a baby wipe and then sometimes even come in with a stamp cleaner if I really want to make sure I'm not transferring a color. And that's going to give us a full card panel of that granny square design. Now, my first card example that I have for you here is where I stamped just at the individual square and then die cut it out. So I stamped that 3 times and die cut it out. So I just created that single row at the bottom of my card front. I have those sewing hooks kind of tucked behind, and the colors I used for that were nectar. I believe it was clementine, pimento, brickyard, and midnight. The next card that I have to share with you is actually one I created from an accident. So when I was trimming down a background, I had messed up, but there were some strips that I had die cut out, and I thought they looked really neat just cut into these thin 1/4 inch strips. So I layered those down at the bottom of my cardstock. Again, a lot of white space going on those card fronts, but then I'll finish it off with using the full background panel, which I did trim down to be about 3 3/4 by 5 inches. I used pebble cardstock in the background to kind of tone that down just a little bit, and then added the die cut things to the front. And there we have the introduction to the Granny Square Turnabout stamp set and dies. Lot of fun, colorful patterns that are just waiting to be stamped out. Welcome to the introduction to Paw Prints double card front die. This is essentially 2 dies in one and allows you to create the paw prints to go in a vertical direction, or you flip it and place your cardstock the other way and you can go in a horizontal direction. It doesn't actually die cut anything out, but what it's doing is applying that stitched detail for a fun textured look to your backgrounds. The first card example I have here for you is using it in a landscape orientation, and this is using lakefront cardstock. You can see that really fun paw print stitched detail, and I paired it with some adorable images from the Pet Pals set. The next card project I have is going in a vertical direction, and this is also combining it with an adorable image here from the Pet Pals collection, and the texture design is on sea glass cardstock that I used for my base. So it appears on any color cardstock, white, black, colored, and just gives it a really fun, playful look to your card project. That is a closer look at the Paw Prints double card front die. Welcome to the introduction to Pattern Peacock Inlay Die and Embossing folder. These two products work beautifully together, but also work well on their own. First, we have the Peacock Inlay die, which fills up an entire card front, and it does cut out everything that you see. So the outline, the inside piece, and then even a smaller inside piece. And then there's an additional die to help kind of fill in the smaller piece. And then we have our embossing folder, which is going to give it a nice, I call it a billowing look, because it is a beautiful design once embossed. What I like to do when using inlay dies like this is I die cut it from a color of cardstock, and then I place that onto a piece of press and seal. Now, after I use my cover plate die a couple times, it sticks really well to the cover plate. So all I need to do is put that press and seal on the back, push down really well, and then I can just kind of pop everything into place. Now, after a while, it does start to loosen up, but I find it works really well when I'm working on projects. It also gives me a lot more possibilities and to really use up my scraps. So one of the first things is that you can kind of peel away to give that outline. So that outline that you see in the purple cardstock can be used on its own or to complete the inlay design. Then you have the larger piece that I did out of gold glitter, the inside piece out of sprout, and then those ones that I pointed to on the side would kind of fill in down at that very point, down at the bottom of that very point. So you could do an entire card front with this or use the individual pieces on their own. And I'll show you a variety of those with the card examples that I created. The first card example that I have here is doing kind of that frame piece or the outline piece out of silver glitter cardstock. The larger centerpiece I did out of lilac, and then I have a briar rose and a plumberry. So this is an entire card front panel. I used all of the pieces for those, but then I was able to save all those extra pieces for future projects. And I completed a sentiment for that using the Pretty Peacock die set or stamp set and die set. This is another background I created using the complete panels to do an entire background with that peacock design. This one I went for more kind of traditional peacock colors. So that one I used gold glitter cardstock, Harbor, Sprout, and Midnight cardstock. I also finished that off with a stamped sentiment from the Pretty Peacock stamp and die set. And then my last card project is pairing this with the embossing folder. So this you can see in the background, I have it flipped the side where it's not quite as billowy. The other side is really billowy, kind of reminds me of a pillow. But we have the embossed panel there on white cardstock. And then I was able to fill in those areas in between the embossed lines using gold glitter cardstock, lilac, and briar rose. So that's a fun way to show you that you can use an entire background or just bits and pieces and create your own design. And that is the introduction to the Pattern Peacock Inlay Die and Embossing folder. Welcome to the introduction video to Pet Pals Stamp Set and Dies. Get ready to create the cutest dogs and cats using this brand new Pet Pals set. So not only do you create those adorable animals, but they also have different elements that you can decorate them, customize them, also have them carrying something, whether it's flowers or balloons. And then, of course, a bunch of really fun sentiments to coordinate with that. Now, here is a look at some dogs and cats that I had die cut out and just created in a bunch of different colors and styles. You can do plain white cat or plain colored dogs. You can add spots. There's handkerchief. There's collars for the dog and the cat. Then, of course, we have balloons, a flower bouquet. We also have a bow tie, and then there's a little heart in there. So lots of really cute ways to dress these guys up. There's some features with these dies that I'm going to be pointing out too that Concord and Ninth really thought of everything. So first you have your main die for your dog and your cat that is showing the etched line with the face on it. But then there's also an additional die to create the layer behind it. So it can either be a shadow layer or it could be you showing you the other side of their body. So the other paws. So what Concord and I thought of is for some of these dies that are really small and you may not be sure where they go, on the back of the die, if you flip it over, it's going to tell you what it's for. So whether it is for the dog or it'll say spots on there. So that's going to help you in identifying where those dies go or where those pieces go once you die cut them out. This one on the back says spots, but that can be used for a dog or for the cat if you wanted to create a calico cat, which is what you're going to see on one of my card projects. I'll point out some of these pieces here so you can kind of get an idea what they're for. So this first batch here, that is a collar for the dog. We have spots for the dog, and then we have the ears. There's another set of spots there. We also have these stripes for the cat. So you can use the spots for the cat or the dog. Those work really well. We have pieces for the tail and the paws if you wanted to give your cat some mittens on their paws is what I like to call them. And then there is a collar for the dog and also the cat because I think the cat's neck is just a little bit smaller. You have a bow tie, two different styles of handkerchiefs. We have a balloon that you can either stamp a paw print in or there's like that stitched die you can add in there. And some of the sentiments fit really well in the balloon too. The sentiment set includes a lot of punny sentiments. So we have you are possum, I woof you, so proud of you, congratulations, sorry that things have been rough, it's your big day, you're perfect, love you, hip hip hooray, thank you. And then there's hello, yay, and thanks. And those are curved where they can fit around the back or around the outline or around the body of the dog or the cat. And also an individual paw print, so you can stamp that for a background or you can stamp it on a balloon. On the first card project that I have that I'm going to be showing you is using the dog. You'll see right there I stamped the word thanks. You can see how that kind of goes right along its body line. I added spots. It's carrying this beautiful bouquet of flowers. And then I also did the sentiment you are possum. In the background, I have nectar cardstock using the Dots and Blossoms stencil, which is a previously released stencil. And then this really simple but colorful card is using the cat. I used the spots to create a calico cat, added a teal colored collar. It's jumping for this big colorful bunch of balloons. And in the background, I added some clouds from the Plain Amazing set. So these guys are really just the cutest, and it's going to be so fun to see the different ways that you can customize your animal to look like maybe your pet. And that is your introduction to a Pet Pals Stamp and Die Set. Welcome to the introduction to Pretty Peacock Stamp and Die Set. The Pretty Peacock set is a stamp and die that allows you to create a beautiful, colorful peacock. So, the stamp set, you can do the stamped feathers along with some sentiments, and the die set allows you to create a die cut version. But there's also coordinating dies to die cut out the body and the feathers. So, you have your main feathers there as the largest piece. Then we have added details. There's the body of the peacock that has a couple layers to it, some sentiments, some stamped flowers, and then, of course, the inspiration on the back. Now, the die set, the largest die for the feathers, die cuts out the stamped image, but the smaller one is where you can do die cutting of the flowers if you prefer that. There's also coordinating dies for the flower, the leaves, the peacock body. The feet has either a die cut feet, or you can stamp the feet and die cut those out with the coordinating die. And then there's some banner sentiments on there that fit with the banner die. Here's a look at how everything would be stamped or die cut out. And I actually used the inspiration on the back of the packaging. That's a good way to just kind of jumpstart my creativity. So the first two images were the stamped out version of the peacock body and the feathers. Then we have these sentiments, flaunt your feathers with a coordinating die cut sentiment, so proud of you. And then there are some smaller sentiments that fit within the banner. Those sentiments read, always here for you, have a beautiful day. And then there's a skinny line sentiment that says, so proud of you. One piece I really wanted to point out was this small one that's in the head section there. That is for the eye, the beak, and also the eyeball. So be careful with that piece. Don't lose it like I did. You also have your additional coordinating die for the leaves. So the leaves stamp all at once and you can die cut them all at once. So after creating with the colors that Concord and Ninth provided to kind of jumpstart my creativity, then I started playing around with different color combinations in some teal colors. I actually ink blended a background and used the standalone die to do the feather background. And then I did a mix of teals and purples. The first card example I want to share with you is just using the feathers. So this is the stamped feathers that I use as my focal point. In the background, I used a piece of the die from the patterned Peacock Inlay die set. So that just created some really nice soft texture and a subtle pattern in the background. And then some of the littler circles on here, I did die cut out using the die set for the Pretty Peacock, and that was out of a silver glitter cardstock, just to add some sparkle to that. Now, this next card in the background, I used the Pattern Peacock Embossing folder, and this is where it has kind of that billowing effect. I kind of look at it as like a nice fluffy pillow. So it's a great way to add that into the background for soft and subtle. So it doesn't take away from my colorful peacock. This is using the die set, and I did that out of Ballet Slipper, Briar Rose, and Plum Berry, which is just a stunning and unique color combination. So this is one of those sets where you can really dig out your inks, experiment, and see what different color combinations you can come up with. That is a closer look at the Pretty Peacock stamp and die set. These are available at concordandninth.com. Thanks so much for watching.